Welcome everyone to this webinar on sharing perspectives on vulnerability to viability, and a very happy World Fisheries Day. My name is Simmer Kaur and I am the project coordinator for the V2V Global Partnership. So each year, World Fisheries Day is celebrated on November 21st throughout the world by fishing communities. This day is celebrated through workshops, public meetings, cultural programs, music shows, and now webinars such as this one, all to demonstrate and highlight the importance of maintaining world's fisheries. This webinar presents an excellent opportunity to use a common vision and reflect on vulnerabilities and viabilities in the context of small-scale fisheries. And when it comes to characterizing small-scale fisheries, its challenges and its opportunities, words such as multidimensional, complex, and highly dynamic are often used, which is why it is so exciting to have early career researchers and graduate students from around the world on one platform to share their perspectives as they draw upon their experience from their fieldwork, case studies, future research plans, and pre-existing work. In today's session, we have a total of 16 early career researchers and graduate students from around the world. Thank you to all our participants today for being an active part of the conversation, and to everyone tuning in on YouTube. Feel free to engage with us using the comment section. I'll be monitoring it throughout the session today. Now I would like to introduce Anna Carolina, who will be moderating today's session and facilitating a discussion at the end of the talk, or all the talks. Anna Carolina is currently a postdoc fellow with the V2V Global Partnership. Anna, you can take over now.
Thank you, Simar. Hi, everyone. We are starting with the presentations, students' presentations. I have copied the list and the order of the presentations in the chat. We might do some arrangements if people haven't arrived yet. And yes, we can start with students' presentation. Each student will have 3 minutes to address key issues regarding vulnerability and viability in their research context. And yes, let's get started. So I will call Aini Nur Furuida from Indonesia to get started. Or we can jump to Ahaba Aful from Senegal.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Araba Afolam. I'm actually Ghanaian, but I school in Senegal. So actually, I'm working on sea level rise and its impacts in coastal regions. Actually, since I'm an economics, I'm leveling it to the livelihood of these coastal dwellers. And one of the objectives it will be to look at how vulnerable these coastal dwellers or their livelihood is to the level of rising sea levels, which is actually obvious, especially at one of the impacts of climate change. So that's what I'm looking at. And then in the case of vulnerability, vulnerability in simple terms, I think vulnerability is how the system, the characteristics of the system. So in this case, let's say the fisheries or the fish farmers, the characteristics of them or of their livelihood, that makes it susceptible to, in the light of climate change or environmental state, as is in the context of V2V. I think they are looking at climate change and environmental factors and other environmental factors, which most researchers do. Usually, when they are working on climate change, it's not just about climate change, but other environmental factors. They also look at that. So then vulnerability, we look at how these fisheries or these farmers, the characteristics of them or of their system of fishery that makes them open to all these climatic factors and environmental factors. And when you look at viability, usually in the context of climate change, I would liken it to adaptation. how they are able to cope in the light of these vulnerability or this climate change or other environmental factors, which usually it's very difficult to control, since some of these things, though they are caused by human factors at times, there are other natural factors that are associated with it, which makes it difficult for you to control it. So then in this viability, we are looking at how they can or they are able to cope, or they are able to maintain their level irrespective of the fact of the disaster they are facing. And looking at how my project is able to look at how viable these farmers or these fisheries could be, one of my objectives will be to examine the coping mechanisms of these coastal dwellers in terms of their livelihood. So then when we see how these people cope or they are able to adapt to these changes, usually some of these things are orthodox. They are orthodox and they are not really technologically advanced. So then, even though they are not technologically advanced, at least they have some way of coping with it. So then you examine it and you see how maybe you could you could fix the technological factor into it, or you could make it more impactful or more than just a small scale something. So then examining the coping factors will help us to know how we are able to move from their vulnerability to how viable they could be. So then I think I've elapsed my 3 minutes. Maybe that's what I could say for now. And
Thank you.
so that's how it is.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So now we'll move to Betty Ping from Malaysia.
Sorry, just to remind everyone, the two questions that each speaker today is addressing is, how would you define vulnerability to viability? And how does your research respond to moving from vulnerability to viability in the context of small-scale fishers? Sorry, thanks.
Thank you, Simar. Betty Ping from Malaysia, you can start your presentation.
Maybe move on to the next presenter and
let's go to Emily Filinska from the University of Waterloo.
Hello.
Canada.
Okay. I believe vulnerability to viability means using strengths of local communities currently responding to vulnerabilities and building on these to help guide other communities. Sharing of knowledge on vulnerabilities will not only benefit the long-term viability of each individual community, but sustainability of our planet as a whole. Fisher interactions with cetaceans are increasing globally due to expanding fisheries, which is my research. Cetacean bycatch is a vulnerability faced by small-scale fisheries with a variety of impacts. Initiatives have been taken place in some small-scale fishery communities, whether it be gear adaptations or strong local representation through fisher associations. Also, some small-scale fisheries have maintained cooperative relationships with cetaceans and have mutually beneficial interactions. Learning about the vulnerabilities of cetacean bycatch impacts will help to understand the strengths certain small-scale fisheries possess and helping increase the viability of positive cetacean-fisher interactions and therefore long-term viability of marine ecosystems. Some small-scale fisheries possess resilience and adaptive capacities regarding cetacean bycatch. In order for the marine ecosystem to remain viable, fishers must be able to adapt to more positive interactions with cetaceans to increase overall resiliency. Whether the local community and fishers are willing to and/or have the resources to implement adaptations to gear and/or fishing practices themselves speaks to their adaptive capacity. The well-being and sustainability of small-scale fishery livelihoods are impacted through bycatch in a variety of ways depending on its severity. In majority of small-scale fisheries, fisher interactions with cetaceans are negative and result in high levels of bycatch, impacting their well-being, such as by decreasing morale or driving fishers to unsustainable practices. Bycatch events also lead to destruction of gear and loss of catches, which directly impact the fisher livelihoods. Political ecology and empowerment are very important when analyzing a community's strengths in responding to cetacean bycatch. Specific policies must be in place to support local communities in implementing bycatch mitigation strategies, and fisher associations also need to have a strong presence or need to be created in some instances for policy decision-making, providing valuable fisher knowledge on the ecology of the area and potential trade-offs. Local communities themselves must also be empowered regarding illegal fishing and monitoring of the area, potentially through deputizing a member of the local community and such. So whether interactive or multi-level governance is present in the small-scale fishery may impact the local community's support for cetacean bycatch mitigation. Local communities need to be directly involved in decisions with government representatives before policies are put into place regarding bycatch. Example, through open discussions, workshops, etc. And governments at all levels need to be involved in discussions to fully support local communities and provide them with the acknowledgement they deserve. So that's how my research on cetacean bycatch is linked to vulnerability to viability, and that's my kind of little definition.
Thank you, Emily. Let's welcome Ervin Prayogi from Indonesia.
So, thank you for the time. My name is Ervin Prayogi. Now I am based on Indonesia, especially on East Kalimantan. My opinion about vulnerability to viability, based on my research, still about 1 year in here. So it's a different things to another fisheries people. So when we go to the upstream, there is a lot of fisher. A lot of fisher really on the life on the river. So a lot of forest change into oil, palm, private company, and also coal. There is a make the river is sick because the use of fertilized chemical to grow the oil palm production. Because of that, the fish on the river became dead, and then the river became changed the color from thick black until become to the red to like a tea. And when we go to the coastal, there is a different problem to make a vulnerability. The forest on the coastal change into the shrimp pond because the fisher make a cultivation for shrimp and then change the nipa forest to make a cultivation. From my opinion, there is another different condition to make a viability to different some fishermen. When we make a different condition, there is a different right for the indigenous people. In the upstream and the downstream is make a different things also. So there is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's welcome Hapsari Ayu from Indonesia. Hapsari, can you hear us?
Okay, I hear you. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss my research outline. Okay, if my opinion, even fishers are not the poorest in community, they are the most vulnerable to change. Okay, because of change in technology, nature, social culture, and government policies, their lives tend to fluctuate. Easily, they fluctuate because of vulnerability. They become vulnerable. So, because of that vulnerability, they need an appropriate strategy to be more viable in their lives. I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move to...
Hello.
Hello.
Good day. I'm Taufik Yeda from Lagos State University, Nigeria. Sorry, I came a bit late.
Oh, that's good. That's fine. We are moving now to presenter Igusti Lanang from Indonesia to proceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Gusti, can you hear us? Or can move to Joyce Seki from Canada, Waterloo.
Oh yes, sorry.
Oh yes, it's still time.
Sorry.
Thank you.
sorry. Yes, thank you so our times. I want to presentation this my paper, and the title, the prospect and strategic V2V for Buleleng Bali Indonesia Coastal Ecosystem Development for Fisheries. I want to share screen. Result and discussion for my research. First, condition of social, economic, and customary of small fisheries in Buleleng, Bali. Next, second, sorry. Second, strategy of small fisheries household in meeting life need. Next slide. And this conclusion, this my research, the vulnerability of this small fisheries community of Buleleng inseparable from various factors. This due to change, in the catch season, where this factor have caused uncertainty in the catch of small fisheries. So then, when the season does not catch fish, the fisheries are very trouble to meet their daily consumption needs. Next slide. Small fisheries still survive as fisheries because of the low level education of fisheries and the difficulty of finding job, including the fisheries family with low educational costs, the difficulty for fisheries to access available employment opportunity due to limited ability and expertise, and some small fisheries are also due to factor in old age, so it is difficult to work in other place. Next slide. Strategy to deal with the economic problem of small fisheries family in Buleleng who have difficulty in meeting their family needs, namely active, passive strategy, and network strategy. Actively, namely adding hours of work or having said job, and passive debt is reducing expenditure when the is novice, and the network strategy is to make loan to family, relative, neighbor, and LPD, credit institution. The
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. I guess I'll move to the next presenter, Made Prasetyadevi from Indonesia.
Anna, I think Gusti is back, so.
Oh, okay.
I see him, but.
Okay, we can try maybe a few more minutes. Gusti?
Yeah, I think it's gone, so I think move on, but you need to unshare the screen.
Optimizing cooperation between fisheries so that the fisheries can increase anti-poaching fish catch against various possibility in seasonal fish in the sea. Second, increase the educational level of the residents of the coastal community in order to educate the life of small fisheries community, not only informal education but also in informal or non-formal education. Number 3, fisheries groups and assistant activities need to be on this that small fisheries and for fisheries in terms of procurement of facilities and infrastructure such as customer and productive credit for processing outboard machine in order to support fishing business in the sea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So proceeding, we'll welcome Royal Mia from Bangladesh Memorial University.
Thank you, Anna. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can see you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Again, this is Mohammad Royal Mia, and I'm a master's student in the Department of Geography at Memorial University of Newfoundland. I was born and brought up in a country that is blessed with huge fisheries resources. I am speaking about Bangladesh, which is known as country with 700 rivers. Fish is the most popular food item after rice in the national diet, giving rise to the adage "Masse bate Bangali," that means a Bengali is made of fish and rice. The fishery sector in Bangladesh is usually mean as small-scale fisheries to the majority of the people. I found this sector is most interesting to me. However, when I started to know or started to understand more about this sector, I found many challenges and difficulties that directly affects livelihoods, well-being, food and nutritional security for more than 17 million people in Bangladesh. For example, lower fisheries productivity, seasonality in fishing, frequent natural disaster, and poor management system. Such internal and external difficulties that make small-scale fishing communities susceptible to harm, which is what vulnerability means to me. I think many of the vulnerabilities of small-scale fisheries should be addressed by taking and enforcing proper policies and regulations specified for small-scale fisheries. I also think that more participation of small-scale fishers in the decision-making process is required, and benefits should be distributed equally among all the stakeholders. For example, in the context of the market, an effective local market system should be established to ensure that small-scale fisher people get fair prices for their products. Such improvements in small-scale fisheries are what viability means to me. I will be conducting 2 case studies in Bangladesh and Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, which focuses on access to markets for small-scale fisheries by addressing some of the issues that small-scale fisheries are facing in their efforts to get access to markets, such as unfair pricing and lack of bargaining power with sellers. More specifically, my study will examine how the markets are structured and governed, whether they facilitate or inhibit access for small-scale fisheries. I believe the findings of this study will contribute to the pathways of a more viable markets in governing system by addressing the vulnerabilities. That's all about my presentation. Thank you everyone again, and happy World Fisheries Day.
Thank you. Let's welcome Amani Begum from Bangladesh.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I think now you are muted.
Jelly video.
Hello, I think you're muted again.
Can you hear me, Carolina?
Yes, now I can.
I would like to share my perspective-based small-scale coastal fisheries of Bangladesh. Here, risk and vulnerability are inseparable parts of fishing in the Bay of Bengal. The small-scale fishermen actually face challenges that come from a broad area of complex environmental, economics, and political pressures, and also the changes that make them vulnerable.
Sorry, I think you're muted again.
Are you hearing?
Yes.
Actually, I couldn't understand what is happening with me. Okay, I would like to continue.
Sure, Nicole.
Chambers defined vulnerability as defenselessness, insecurity, and exposure to risk, shocks, and stress. Further, he explained vulnerability has two sides. Basically, an external side of risk, shocks, and stress to which an individual or household is subjected. And it has an internal side too, which is a defenselessness of a community or an individual, meaning a lack of means to cope with without damaging loss. Currently, we are doing a review on what factors actually contributing to vulnerability in small-scale fisheries in Bangladesh and what conditions make them viable. In our existing study, we found various factors that contribute to fishers' vulnerability and coping strategy to redress vulnerability. I'd like to share these factors I found in my study. Dependency on single species. Actually, in Bangladesh, people are centered to a single species. They are the Hilsha fishermen group or shrimp or prawn larvae dependent group. That cause when there is not Hilsa season, they become vulnerable. They have not enough catch to secure their livelihood. Another factor, the seasonality and fluctuation of natural resource, extreme weather conditions, cyclone and coastal storms. In case of you may be know, it may be known to you that there is a big mangrove forest in our country. So in case of Sundarban area, that is called Sundarban. In case of Sundarban area, there is a human-tiger conflicts, make coastal fishermen vulnerable. Piracy and other unlawful activities also causing community vulnerable. Landlessness and settlement in areas exposed to coastal disaster. Death of breadwinners and female-headed households. Dowry. Lack of access in political processes and local institutions. Market beggars and fishers, limited capacity to bargain, and lack of access to the formal credit system. On the other hand, actually viability is the educate capacity and ability to cope with crisis and shocks and maintain the livelihoods of fishermen with their family. Thus, vulnerability to viability actually indicates to me that to move from a disadvantageous situation to advantageous situation for a sustainable livelihoods. Poor fisher, however, cannot afford to be without income or sit idle for a long periods of time when there is no peak season. Hence, they develop ways of coping with the changing conditions and vulnerabilities as they experience. We classified these assets that that help them to adapt viability from the vulnerable situation, and that is natural assets, human assets, financial, physical, and social assets. Natural assets includes good income from peak fishing season. There are sometimes income supplement from other sources. Then in case of I mentioned before that there is a mangrove forest area. In case of them, there is alternative source for rather than fishing. This is a forest resource or nearby areas. The human assets also help them to be viable. Family head skilled in industries, women's mobility for works, development of skills through education, family members work outside of fishing jobs, small household size. In the category of financial assets, we found two things that help them to be viable. That is self-insurances through saving in peak season, and the other is come from out migration, that is remittance. And the physical assets include income diversification through gardening, agriculture, or any other means that is available to them. Sometimes direct marketing facility.
Amani?
Yeah.
Could you please go with a few more sentences and conclude? We're running out of time.
I'm about to conclude. Then, well connected by road or infrastructure also help them to be viable. That is lacking in our country. Social assets also include good family network or cooperation between relatives and community. So if we emphasize on these assets, we hope that there is a probability to reduce vulnerability and to adapt viability in Bangladesh small-scale fisheries. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So let's welcome Natasha Serrao from Canada.
Hi, I'm Natasha, and so my background is in conservation genetics, and genetics are important because we can use genetics to identify if a species of fish is present in a water, and we can use it to identify between different species. But within a species, we can also use it to look at different strains as well as how well a fish is doing. So in the scope of vulnerability to viability, we can use genetics to determine how healthy a fish population is doing and what factors it might take to move that towards viability. And then from the fisher perspective, that's also important because the fishers rely on the fish. So like an increase in fish abundance would be beneficial. And for my research, what I want to do is use genetics to be able to identify information, like fisheries information, but then also use the knowledge within fishers and try to be able to use both knowledge systems parallel and identify the strengths and the weaknesses of, the strengths and how both of them combine. And that's it.
Thank you, Natasha.
Oh, and I think you were muted.
Sorry. So thanks, Natasha. Let's welcome Ryochi Kato from Japan.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryochi Kato, and I'm 40-year student and studying at Department of Environmental and Societal Affairs in Marine Science and Technology at Tokai University, Japan. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to attend the webinar. I grew up in Chiru City in Aichi Prefecture until 15 years old. During my last year of middle school in Japan, my father's job transferred to Bangalore, where the southern part of India. I spent my 3 years of high school over there, and I learned a multicultural view of country and people. I became interested in Professor Lee's research when I took some of her courses and communicated with her. Recently, I got to know the V2V project and the TVTI project through Professor Lee, and became even more interested in the small-scale fisheries and coastal fisheries. So I'm very much excited about my master's journey with Dr. Lee and the project. Here are some of my thoughts on vulnerability to the viability of small-scale fisheries. First, about the vulnerability, I think people rightly view about who own small-scale fisheries. Reasons of these opinions, people just compare vessel size or how much quantity does fisherman caught. The small-scale fisheries are able to target many different species other than large-scale fisheries and has longer traditions. Second, I think numbers of fishers in Japan is declining, affected by vulnerability in fishing industries. I think when we select our jobs, people have more interested mind in another job other than fisheries. Thirdly, Small-scale fisheries are mainly owned family business, and generations of fishers became more and more elder. The fishers community also affected from aging population issue and difficult to find who has interest to continue their business in next generations. And viabilities, firstly, we should make a record or log the fisher's knowledge and skills. As I said in the vulnerability, small-scale fisheries mostly owned by family business. So passing the knowledge and skills are transmitted by communicating or teaching on-site training. But this is unstable. Therefore, we should record the log what will be happens, and it will be treasured in the future. Secondary, fishers' income rates is less than the other jobs, so we should make it as a similar like as the another jobs. And thirdly, we need to share the importance role of small-scale fishery to all over the world. Once the people understood of it, I think it will be good to recruit the who has interest about fishing business. I believe that a key of solution to solve this vulnerability to viability is social networking site, SNS. Nowadays, IT and SNS are very popular, and people receive information through SNS avoid the infections of COVID-19. So my idea of make a positive impact of vulnerability to viability is fishers outputs information through SNS, then we should know about them. Then I haven't decided yet about a specific research topic in master journey, but I want to become a researcher who can contribute to positively impact small-scale fisheries research. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's welcome Said Raihan from Bangladesh.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sir Tawhid Raihan. I am a research assistant in Center for Sustainable Development. It's in Bangladesh. We are part of the University of Liberal Arts Bangladesh. Now, for the last year, I've been working with sustainable development projects. Coincidentally, all of them have been working with fishermen. So, and I've been working in the Bangladesh coastal areas mostly. So when it comes to vulnerability to viability, in my eyes, in an ever-changing world, some of us have the capacity to change. Most do not have it, and that makes them vulnerable. And viability is fixing that disparity. Since our focus is on small-scale fisheries, I'll only stick to that. So a little bit of context, the small-scale coastal fisheries in Bangladesh it's a dangerous profession. If you guys don't know, Bangladesh is very prone to cyclones. And these are storms, they're seasonal. It's almost like every year you are bound to have one. And there are minor storms throughout the year. And this fishermen, we were initially working with a project from Peel University with Solar Sea, where we were looking for a solution, if you could give them freezing solutions. So once they get the catch, they could preserve it. While interviewing them, I ran into this issue where we found that they had no mode of communication. So they didn't have any radio. So once they were out of cell phone range, 1 or 3 kilometers offshore, they were in radio silence for 15 days. And once they were out in the ocean, they were, their family members, no one knew if they were dead or alive until they returned. So this is a huge risk that they take upon themselves. And we're trying to find a solution to see if we can provide communication to them. So that's one of my projects. Another one is that there is no insurance policy for the families of these fishermen. So all the burden falls on the head of the family, who are usually men. And once, if they are lost out at sea, the companies they work for do not provide any form of insurance or any compensation for the lost fishermen. So these are some of the things we encountered. During the COVID outbreak, we were working with NGF. There was a 65-day fishing ban, where the government issues a ban to control stop fry fishing, so that there's a much larger catch next year to increase the fish resources. But the COVID ban also coincided with the fishing ban, and this left most of them hungry and neglected. And fishing is not a transferable skill. It's a labor intensive job, and when you're social distancing, you can't exactly um, go and find work. So the alternative would be working in farms. Farmlands are salty, saline, so they can't grow things. They can't go into labor intensive jobs like construction because the corona pandemic has prevented them from doing that. So most of them were barely going by, starving. Another work I'm working with is the Heidelberg climate change, migration, and health policy. And we were originally working with people in Dhaka slums who have migrated from coastal belt. And coincidentally, again, they're all fishermen. Mostly are fishermen. They were fishermen, danger, they couldn't survive there. So they had to move to horrible living conditions in cities and polluted areas. And my point is that there are simple solutions to all these problems, and we just have to implement them. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's welcome Taufik Iyande from Nigeria.
Yes, thank you very much. Taufik Nyoda from Lagos State University. I'm a final year student of Fisheries, and I've been opportune to work with various professors in the departments on fisheries projects. If you who work with what fish center projects.
Taufik? Hello?
During the period of an opportunity to serve as an intern. This has given me opportunities to, and most especially, is the moving from an inconducive state to a more conducive state. The vulnerability state or the vulnerable state is an inconducive state, while the viability state is the conducive state that is being brought in, which involve the identification of various factors that contribute to the vulnerable states of the small scale fisheries and providing a sustainable solution to move the state to a variable one is the concept of vulnerability to viability. So, considering the situation of Nigeria, several literatures and works has been done on how small scale fisheries has been affected in Nigeria. One of the latest one, or one of those ones that has been done in Nigeria by Akitola et al. 2017 is on the implementation of small scale fisheries guidelines. You know, one of those things that the small scale fishermen have faced throughout the period uh, is that they have not been a guideline that guide the way fish is being the small scale fishermen implement their activities, and that has caused the um, over exploitation of the fishery resources. One of the core things that moves fishermen from a particular place to the other is basically if there is no more fish at that particular place again. Well, this has caused a lot of challenges that is yet to be solved in the context of fisheries in Nigeria. To add again, I want us to know that the concept of vulnerability is relative to a particular region, because what is occurring or what is operating in Nigeria, it might be quite different from what is operating in other countries. So my research is trying to look at how can we look at the problem from the indigenous people specifically. How can we know what is their status? What are those things that are vulnerable to the fishermen, rather than the pre-assessment or state, or looking at it at the concept of what might be their challenges. So my research is looking towards how to bring together the indigenous knowledge of the people of Nigeria, basically the Badagry Creek and the modern knowledge, or the knowledge, the guidelines, the small scale fisheries guidelines, combining it together and seeing a point where they are going to meet. And one of the core things, or one of the core ways to achieve this, is number one, leadership. The leadership, which is also the governance, the fisheries governance. In this case, I'm referring to the customary governance, because one of the core parts of governance that operates in Nigeria in terms of the fisheries, small scale fisheries, is the um, customary leadership or traditional leadership. But so unfortunate that most of the guidelines, most of the policies that is being established have never put into consideration the opinion of those of this traditional or customary leadership. Not only that, they have also sidelined the fishers and the fishermen and some other stakeholders in the fisheries. So my research is going through this place and looking at how can we get enough data of this, or about the about the small scale fishes, and how can this data and this information can be used to affect the situation of the fishermen. Very recent, according to a research published by Fakoya and Akitola on or a paper, Fear of Flight, which discuss about the way in which the fishermen, or the fishermen and the post harvest fishermen are being displaced from their places, because most of them abide at the bank of the rivers or the coastal side of the country. So these are the challenges that we are facing in the country, and many resources has also been actually done on it, but the vulnerability to viability aspect of it has not been critically addressed. So I wish to address this.
Thank you. Let's welcome Valeria Mendoza de la Luz, Canada.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. My research is related with tourism and small-scale fisheries. And for the first questions, like how would you define vulnerability to viability? In my opinion, this means like planning a better future for them. It's a process that may involve a more comprehensive assessment to really understand all the needs that they have, and also try to follow community-based approaches in our research and future work. We don't only have to point what has been done wrong in the past or the severity of their threats, but we actually need to consider those mistakes and challenges as a basis to learn, create, and ensure a more viable and resilient scenarios for the fisheries environment where they live and the community as a whole. And for the second question, how does my research respond in the context of the fisheries? My research is looking at community development and prospects and challenges of small-scale fishing communities that interact with it. The ecotourism practice is increasing in my study area. It's currently in the southeast of Mexico, in the area of Yucatan. And it is considered an activity that is going to continue in the years to come. So what we can do, like we cannot just discard it. And so what I am particularly doing is exploring how to avoid the marginalization of fishers, looking at new ways to integrate them, and also to preserve the knowledge and traditional practices of fisheries. Maybe this sounds like a lot, but it's like all compressed in like some strategies. The World Tourism Organization defines ecotourism has nature-based tourism that aims to protect natural areas, promote and enhance respect and preservation of the lifestyle of rural areas. And it seeks to promote environment preservation awareness, respect for human rights, and social justice among locations. It is also a key option for livelihoods diversification. However, if it is not well planned and managed, it can generate economic, social, political, and environmental pressures. Another important thing to mention is that ecotourism promotes local and regional development by integrating the various activities that are carried out in a geographical space, keeping this in harmony with the care of the environment. So the main objective and contribution of my research aims to see what needs to be done in the small-scale fishing communities of Rio Lagartos, Yucatan, to make a transition from vulnerability to viability and contribute to sustainable and viable economic outcomes with tourism as the main driver. And I hope my findings can be similarly applied to other small-scale fishing communities in the world. And that's all for me.
Thank you, Valeria. Let's welcome Aini Nur Furuida from Indonesia.
Thanks for giving me opportunity to join this webinar V2V World Fisheries Day 2020 and 20. First, I will introduce myself. My name is Florida from Diponegoro University, Indonesia. In this section, I will show about my opinion of my research topic. Small-scale fisheries are not only about fishermen, but also about value chains, post-harvest, and trade. In Indonesia, more than 18% is carried out by small-scale fishermen, give nutrition, security, food, livelihood, and income region. To achieve adaptive capacity of small-scale fisheries can increase value-added small-scale fisheries product. Through enhanced food safety. Food safety is key to ultimate goal of food security, and my study introduce a traceability system to control distribution of fisheries to achieve food safety food in small fisheries. It can relate my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's welcome Betty Nagun Chupian from Malaysia.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Greetings to all. My name is Betty Ngui, and I'm from University Tun Abdurrahman. Resources of Malaysia have been employed and then fishing and high development tourism activities. Marine areas, MPs were established here to protect fisheries, to overexploit marine resources, recover, serve core ecosystems, increase productivity, secure livelihoods of fishers. However, the MPAs have not achieved the degree of success intended, while new problems have emerged due to a number of factors. The objective of our project is to examine diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small fisheries in Malaysia and attempt solutions to improve the livelihoods and well-being of the fishing community. One of the locations covered in a project in Malaysia is the Burundian Islands, which are located in the South China Sea, 21 kilometers off the mainland of Terengganu State on the East Peninsula, Malaya. The two main islands of the Burundian archipelago consist of Perhentian Besar and Perhentian Kecil, with approximate land areas of 807 hectares and 524 hectares respectively. The Burundian Islands are famous for their rich coral reef ecosystems, their numerous fish species, seafood, and other marine resources, besides their beautiful sandy beaches. Burundian Islands were gazetted as a marine park in 1994. Prior to the establishment of the MPA in Perhentian, the majority of local residents were mainly on fishing seafood. A number of critical problems adverse affecting the livelihoods of the small-scale fishing community in the Burundian marine protected areas. Firstly, fishing is within 2 nautical miles from the shore. The law can only afford small fishing boats that do not allow them to fish long distances from the shore. Secondly, coral reefs and fisheries habitats have been damaged due to excessive pressures from tourism-based activities and infrastructural development. Pollution and inadequate sanitation facilities have caused severe environmental problems in the area. Thirdly, fisheries and coral reefs are overexploited, resulting in economic loss and social stress to the poor small-scale fishing community. Fishers from neighboring areas of commercial fishing further the situation. The residents of Perhentian also face various social and governance issues, and among them, huge development projects carried out in the marine park have caused land to become scarce, and there is indiscriminate use for tourism business. And lastly, MPA regulations are not accepted by local fishers, resulting in poor compliance of MPA rules. In conclusion, our research aims to study the problems and issues threatening the livelihood and well-being of poor-scale fishing community in places like Perhentian A, and time look for solution to the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's welcome Joyce Babaseki from Canada.
Yeah, my name is Joyce Sechi, and my research focuses on small-scale fisheries and their vulnerabilities as a result of oil and gas extraction in Ghana. So basically, Ghana started oil exploration in 2007, and this has had adverse impact on fishers and coastal communities in the western region of Ghana. So my research tries to investigate how fishers have been able to thrive from 2007 to now in Aqueda specifically, because there has been previous studies to identify how oil and gas has impacted fisheries in the area. So first of all, my research tries to use adapt to understand the various levels of vulnerabilities that has affected fishes in the area. And I did an analysis of existing studies to understand some of these vulnerabilities. And then what came to light is that most of these areas affected by oil and gas activities suffer from oil spills. They also have issues of movement restriction as a result of the presence of these oil rigs offshore. And so fishers complain of loss of livelihoods, and in some few cases, accident as a result of a collision with these rigs and moving vessels offshore. They are also impacted by seaweed, spread of seaweed, and noise pollution, discharge of harsh chemicals into the environment. But one thing I found very striking is that most vulnerability studies of small-scale fisheries has rather concentrated on how small-scale fisheries respond to climate change. And so this study is going to add to knowledge by trying to investigate how small-scale fisheries also respond to issues of oil and gas. And then one important thing is that some of these vulnerabilities occurring are also similar in other studies. So talk of like climate studies and then impact on livelihoods. And some of these impacts are similar in livelihood issues occurring as a result of oil and gas extraction. So currently my research is at this
Indonesia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Madika Pasade. I'm from Bali, Indonesia. Actually, my research is beyond the topic of small-scale fisheries because my dissertation topic is about sustainable agriculture. But on this question, I joined to increase my knowledge, especially about V2V in the fisheries sector. In my opinion, vulnerability to viability can be said as a decrease in the reliance of a person or group in anticipating, fighting, even recovering from an event in this case, such as natural disaster or climate change. The vulnerability can occur in any community group, both in the fisheries or the agriculture sector. The natural condition, social, economic, and technology can trigger for the vulnerability. So both fisheries and agriculture will be highly vulnerability to climate change. When the climate change occur, it's caused both of wizard or farmer. It's caused the visitors to find it difficult to determine feeding location or water condition. Meanwhile, the farmers have difficult determining planting time or harvest time, and that will impact on productivity. In Bali, the local community or the wisdom the local community wisdom be used as the basic for overcoming vulnerability to viability of fishery both of fisheries fisher or farmer, and Trihita Karana as a tree relationship between human and God. We call Parahyangan. Human with the fellow human we call Pawongan, and human with the environment we call Palemahan are used as the foundation in shaping sustainability. Now in this current pandemic condition, when several areas carry out lockdown in Bali, themselves have one off day to rest the nature, which is everybody know as Nyepi. Then the Hindu community in Bali perform various religious ceremony as from gratitude for to God for nature and its abundant the wealth. The community in Bali also have customary laws that bind and regulate social relationship to reduce conflict that may occur. So maybe that's just I can say, and I'm grateful to be able to join this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you can see that from the presenters, you have a broad range of subjects from natural disaster, climate change, oil and gas exploitation, ecotourism, and a lot of governance aspects. For example, the customary laws, the customary rights, marine protected areas, participation, different stakeholder perspectives. And thinking about all this, I'd like to open the discussion session with a question for the presenters. Maybe one or two of you can address this question. That is, what are some context-specific issues of vulnerability and viability, and what are some common trends that you can observe in vulnerability and viability in small-scale fisheries across different cases and the different talks? So we have some time for one, two of you to address this. What do you think is something more context-specific versus a general pattern in vulnerability and viability in small-scale fisheries? I open the floor for the discussion. Some of the presenters want to speak to it, or you can also open for other questions.
So I guess I'm just starting my PhD and all of these topics are new, but I'm finding that it's really interesting, just like the different ranges of topics, like natural disasters, and then like with the stuff that Emily's doing. So I guess like my question is like, what are the benefits of using like all of these different knowledge, like these knowledge networks or like these diverse knowledge skills? Like if anyone else is able to expand on that.
I think that's a good question. I think by using all of these different areas of specifics within small scale fisheries, that helps us get a lot of the gaps in knowledge that maybe we wouldn't have realized if we weren't all working together. So I think, and that's a lot with like the idea of sustainability as a whole. There's so many different concepts and guidelines and how to achieve sustainability. So I think by all of us having all these different aspects, I think it helps us hopefully start with a strong base of knowledge that then will help us in the future be more successful for the long term. Fingers crossed.
I wanted
hello.
to add something.
Okay. Okay.
Can I?
Can I?
Oh.
Okay. Let me.
So Joyce and then Taufik.
Oh yeah. So I just wanted to add that different regions have different levels of vulnerabilities and capacities to adapt. So when you come to let's say Africa, what might be a present issue amongst small scale fisheries might not necessarily be the same for other continents. And so it is very good to deal with local people or deal with people specifically to know the types of vulnerabilities affecting them and not generalize. And so that could also be another reason for the different topics we have. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. I really appreciate what Joyce has just spoken. I've just said rather. So what I want to say is that just like she has said, the concept of vulnerability is actually different from is different when looking at different regions in the world. And one of the approach which I got while preparing for this discussion is there is a particular approach, participatory diagnostic approach, in which the you focus on the set of people that are actually facing the challenge, and you get information from them, and you get the information from them and continue looking at the challenge they are facing, not looking at it at the angle of maybe a scientific approach, which might not be in line with what they are facing. So I believe if the indigenous people are put into cognizance, or they are put into they are put into I don't know, they are considered first before any other scientific approach or managerial approach, and the vulnerability challenge can be solved easily. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I also jump into the question that Natasha asked?
Sure.
Okay, so from my understanding is that if we study like from a different perspective in small-scale fisheries and also from different regions, so that we will have a broader understanding the context of small-scale fisheries, or how should we approach to address these vulnerabilities or challenges in the small-scale fisheries. So comparing to the different parts of different regions, we will have some generalized knowledge to come up with better solutions. And we also know that from transdisciplinary perspective, there is no single response that can fit for all. Suppose we can have a good solution for small-scale fisheries in Bangladesh in some parts, but it can create problems to other parts, maybe for other sector. So if we have a better understanding from like different perspective, different stories, different aspects, so that we will have a broader solution or better solution in terms of like viability, that what we mean. So that is what I think from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Sure,
so like how do you decide like which plan to implement if if a blanket solution doesn't fit all? Do you guys have any perspectives on that?
I will say something. I think that there's still a lot of common themes within all of these different aspects. Like we can see involving the local community in their direct opinions as to what the vulnerabilities are. Like that's huge. And I can see that that's within everybody's kind of plan, is that their involvement, active participation, involving all levels of government. Like that, I find like there's a lot of common themes within everybody's specific issues, that at least we see that pattern, even though we're in such different little niches. So I think that speaks to the overall guidelines, how we should approach, even though like, let's say oil and gas versus like dolphin bycatch, like there's such huge different issues, but we can understand, okay, well, we need local involvement. That's a common theme between the both. We need, like various stakeholders. There's another common theme. Technology, advancements, innovation, like that's all the sustainability kind of goals too. So I think like that's what can help us with this project and moving from the vulnerability to viability, because this hasn't been done to this extent as much. So I think that's what makes this so beneficial.
Thank you, Emily. To build on that, I was thinking that something that was common in different presentations is that we need to understand the context. And as Emily was saying, how do we understand the context? Engaging local people with participation and taking actions to understand the context, even though the context will be different in different cases. So this is something that was very interesting to see in the different talks.
And can I comment for this
Sure.
Natasha's second question? It is very interesting governance question, how to really place an importance when you start designing programs or policies around such fishery, complex research, complex issue of vulnerability, which has spatial differences, geographical differences, thematic differences, and those kind of issues are there coming in. I think the beauty of this approach, B2B approach, lies in putting the fisher at the center of the whole discussion. So for whom we are actually thinking about, and for what we are thinking about, which is the centerpiece of argument. So that determines most of our confusions, actually. So you and me are disciplinary or interdisciplinary people looking at it, but the fisher who is facing the vulnerability, he himself is facing everything on day to day. For him or her, vulnerability and the context is much more critical, and it's a holistic impact. It's not a very segregated impact. Then how do we really look at this issue into whole policy and governance, which is actually sectoral at times? And knowledge is also very, very, I think, competitive in terms of conflicting, competitive, and collaborative. But when it comes to policy making, my personal experience working 20 years in policy systems, it doesn't really converge and collaborate well unless we actually make our reference point correct. So that's why vulnerable B2B approaches is its whole soul lies in actually working through with and through the community lens, and that's where we can actually bring in difference about the solutions, about the approaches. I think that's the center of how, like in my research in dried fish research, I am looking at the whole community is missing in the value chain. So whole resource system is missing in value chain. When we take the value chain, Walmart decides what is the price is and which value chain will work and which way it will work. But can we just reverse it and looking at from people's perspective, and then we might get some answers to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll pass the word to Simar now to finalize the session.
Sure. I just wanted to quickly add just the context of looking at different countries. And in the context of vulnerability and viability, it really adds focus on what the urgent areas of focus should be in different contexts. So that's a really important point. And that's why all these perspectives and all these concentrations of fields are so important, because of the context that matters so much. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time out in your mornings and evenings to participate in this discussion today on World Fisheries Day. I would like to pass it on to Professor Naik to say a few words.
Thank you very much. This has been an enlightening discussion. I enjoyed so much, listening to all the perspectives from different parts of the world. And that makes it more important to look at vulnerability and viability issues in small-scale fisheries, because there is so much of passion, in the way that you guys are doing your work. So before we conclude, a couple of things. So when I was listening to all the research interests and what people are doing in different areas and different contexts, as there was a big discussion, what it suggests is that vulnerability could be conceptually defined in one way or the other. But when you look at or place vulnerability or viability definitions within a context, what happens is you are looking at how different elements within a system, and many of us work in social ecological system perspective, where we look at the social side of things and also the ecological side of the things. And so therefore we don't look at how the people that are engaged in fisheries are being vulnerable, but we also look at how the natural system, the fish itself, those who are working on dolphins, how the dolphin or the natural system and the lives within the natural system are also becoming vulnerable. So we need to understand vulnerability within the larger context of nature and and people and social and ecological together. So we're talking about vulnerability of a system. What happens within a system is that maybe in most places the entire system is not vulnerable. If you break the system, and those who work in systems theory, they would look at how each and every component of the system may be more or less vulnerable. So we need to kind of understand vulnerability in that sense. So you might find that the livelihood system or the institutional system is much more vulnerable than probably the ecosystem or the habitats of the fish itself. So what happens in that kind of an analysis of vulnerability and viability is that you can then start preserving, or you can start addressing those components that are becoming more and more vulnerable, but also trying to preserve or trying to kind of address those components of the system which are still viable. And this interaction between vulnerable components that are viable, components that are vulnerable, can bring a much more interactive kind of process of addressing vulnerability and viability. So don't look at the entire system being vulnerable. It's not in absolute terms that this thing is viable or that thing is vulnerable, but there are different elements within that needs to be looked at. And it is very reflective in each of the talks that you gave. So you are talking about all of those things, but we need to put that into perspective. And that's where it is becoming important to go back to what Ruel was saying, that there is no panacea, and it's transdisciplinary, and there is no panacea. There is no one solution or one fix that can be brought in, because not only the contexts that are different, but also how different components within the specific context that are becoming more and more vulnerable or more and more viable. So that's more important. The second point I want to mention is that when you are talking about panaceas, or you are talking about how there cannot be one response or one blueprint to a problem of vulnerability, there are two levels we need to see, and this is encompassed within a governance approach and adaptive capacity governance and adaptive responses that you all talked about, is that if you try to apply mechanisms or say policy responses or management responses, they may not be applied everywhere similarly. So they can be very context specific, because they are also oriented towards the kind of problems or issues that one is facing. But if you look at governance at a principle level, so principles can be applied in many places. So principles are values, principles are non-compromisable elements of human life, and you don't make compromises. That means how I behave in Canada, if I travel to another part of the world, I behave the same way if that is my value system. I don't change my value when I, so those are non-compromisable. So within a governance system also, you have values, you have principles that remains the same, almost the same, no matter which context you try to evaluate and address. So within the governance system, then there are specific things that needs to be redesigned and modified and adapted to fit into the context, but also at the same time there are non-compromisable elements like the values and principles that remains almost non-changeable, because these are values. These are the core elements that guide how we intervene into vulnerable and viable situations. So yes, there are no panaceas, but there are elements that are widely applicable, perhaps across a wide range of contexts. So these are all really great elements that are coming out from the discussion. And thank you very much for making time to come and speak about your research and share your views and perspectives. I think one way that we all can contribute to this entire debate and interventions around vulnerability and viability is by strengthening collaborations and strengthening interactions and strengthening relationships between various things. At a field level, we strengthen these things, collaborations and interactions and relationships with our fisher friends, with multiple actors and stakeholders. But at a global level, what we are trying to do is also build networks and build other kinds of collaborations. And this is an example of what we came together today as a group of people, mostly comprising of students and early career researchers, to build these relationships, to build these connections, and promise to work together into the future to address and probably solve and respond to the vulnerabilities that we face, and help small-scale fisheries move towards a viable scenario in wherever we are. So thank you very much, and happy World Fisheries Day once again. And thank you to all the participants and organizers of this particular event. And thanks.